Welcome to Rachel's Studio, and in today's tutorial, I'm going to share an outtake from my full-length, real-time Patreon tutorial of this kitten playing with a Christmas ornament. I want to share the most wonderful brush I used to paint the Christmas tree branches in this piece, which, by the way, is inexpensive. I'll also share the colors I use, how I mix colors, and show you real-time footage of me painting the boughs. Seriously, this brush made painting Christmas tree boughs so easy and beautiful. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you how. So here's the star of the show. It's a bamboo sumi brush designed for Asian calligraphy. Inexpensive. I will put links down below in my description of where you can find it, along with other free tutorials, goodies, my favorite supplies. And I'm picking up some green off my palette. This is a Tom Lynch palette that I really like, and this is a real artist working palette. A lot of times for my tutorials I use a cuter palette, but I love this palette. And the greens that I'm using are Permanent Green Light, Winsor Green Gold, Holbein Aureolin, French Ultramarine. So I'm putting the centers in first, and that will make it really easy to swish in the needles later. And while I'm putting in the center of the bough, let's talk about how to make a successful Christmas tree branch. You want to think in terms of using more than one color is my main bit of advice. So here you see me using a heavily permanent green light mix, and then I go in and I add a little bit of ultramarine blue and junk on my palette to make it a more natural looking green. A little tiny touch of red will make your green look a lot more natural. And then I use really swishy strokes. And by the way, one of the secrets to success of how beautiful these brush strokes came out looking, I think, is this new paper I'm using too, which I'm using Hahnemühle, the collection. And I just picked up some more yellow. So I'm putting different colors of needles onto this bough. So it's not all one flat, just kind of Christmas tree green. I'm putting some yellows, and then I'll put some darks. And if you add some variety of color, it'll make it look more natural and aesthetically pleasing. If you get too much water on your brush, dab it off on a tissue. You kind of want to use a dry brush type stroke here to get the texture looking more realistic. And I also splayed my bristles to get several little needles in one stroke. And you just make your brush stroke as long as the needles are going in the right direction. And use a fast swishy stroke. And this is kind of, like I said, this is dry brush technique where you're using fast strokes. They really misname dry brush because it's not that your paintbrush is really dry, it's that you're using these fast swishy strokes to get these really natural, organic looking brush strokes. In our case, the needles of the Christmas tree bough. And look how aesthetically pleasing and natural these little needles look, because this brush really just makes each stroke look so organic and natural. And there I'm going in with some darker brush strokes and see how that adds more depth and dimension. So after your Christmas tree dries, I would suggest going in and here and there, not everywhere, putting a few darker strokes in. And you can get a darker green just by adding some French ultramarine to your mix, a little bit of red. My favorite red is naphthol red. And that will give you a deeper, also more natural looking green. You don't hardly ever want to use green straight from the tube. It just doesn't look natural. Adding a touch of red, the complement of green, will gray it down just enough to make it look natural. And notice there that I used my finger to pull out some of the wet paint to make an even more natural, longer Christmas tree bough needle. So you can put down your wet paint and then drag your finger through it, and it'll make the needles a little bit longer and really natural looking. Whatever you're painting, think in terms of how these Christmas tree boughs are adding to my painting. They're pointing at the cat. So if you're painting a Christmas tree or Christmas tree boughs and they're just part of a painting, think in terms of them pointing the viewer's eyes towards the main subject of interest. It might be an ornament or an animal. And you can use that also as a design element to tell the viewer's eye where to go. Thank you so much for joining me for this little tutorial. I'd love for you to come join me on Patreon, and thank you so much for my Patreon members who make this channel possible. Now go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody.